hello, with this headband, this feels like a very athletics experience. That's thrilling. I don't really play sports, but I do this a lot. It's a double bagger. Anyhow, thanks for coming to my talk. I always appreciate coming here as well. Fun here, very comfortable chairs. So what I want to go over is what I see people being successful with. I should probably go over unsuccessful things, but that's implied. When they're doing platform engineering in private cloud. Now, I have economic incentives to care about private cloud, but I also think that when I go talk with people, most of them that I talk with are running things on their own. Everyone does everything in the cloud area. But a lot of the commentary and advice that you get really is more about public cloud-based things. So there's some slightly different things that happen when you're running platforms on your own and you're responsible for, which I think are worth going over. And of course, a lot of it comes down to figuring out how platform engineering applies to your situation, what even platform engineering is, things like that. So I'm not going to go over all of the practices such as they are, but highlight the ones that I think are different in a noticeable way when you're running a lot of the platform on your own. So first of all, I feel like maybe I should do some convincing that the private cloud angle is important. And as I'll get into, I think roughly, if you look at all of the, to use an old term, workloads, you could say services and applications that are running in the world, I don't know about low Earth orbit or anything like that, are running on what I would call private cloud, or some people would call it dedicated, right? Like more infrastructure that people manage fully on their own, that they have more ownership of than just using like serverless or even using something like a cluster managed by a public cloud somewhere. And I'll get to the analysis of that. And first of all, a little bit of me. I've been lucky. I was a developer a long time ago, and then I became an industry analyst. I worked on M&A, and I've been working for about 10 years at what was Pivotal, which was acquired by VMware, and now we're something like VMware Tanzu by Broadcom. Fun party time. I always lose track of what our exact names are. But over that time, I've spent most of my time talking with people at large organizations who are both trying to get better at how they build and use software, but also how they run it, hence the platform engineering type of stuff. And I don't know, I got a bunch of podcasts and little books and stuff. As my friend Andrew Schaefer likes to say, engage with my brand. But we'll move on. So let's talk about that private cloud angle, right? Like, where are the apps? How can we sort this out? And there's a whole lot of analysis you can go in, but I want to give the brief angle there. And having been an analyst, I like to go gather things that people have said and what their estimates are. And here you have something from January from the now CEO of AWS, talking about large organizations. And I'm sure this is a little offhanded, right? But it's also Amazon, so they probably have numbers and 6-page memos and barking dogs and things like that, helping sort this out. And you can see that there's this estimate that at large organizations, enterprises, if you will, that they service, right? There's a very wide spread, but they only have about 10 or 40% of their applications running in public cloud, right? Now, again, it's a very wide spread. And of course, if you're paying attention to your public cloud company, you want to, in a kind of paradoxical way, show that there's not that many things running in the cloud because there's growth ahead. So therefore your share price is justified, right? So you can always look at any type of data and explain it away to whatever your own biases are. But I think it's good to start with the source here, like someone who probably is tracking what those workloads are. So we start to see one number there, and then we can go over to IDC. Good. I should have warned you that I was going to have some industry analyst references here in case that's a triggering thing for you. But they're pretty good at tracking year over year for probably at least a decade, everything in IT for many more decades. But here, this is from their most recent Cloud Pulse report, where they're estimating. And I have to be very careful. I asked for permission to use this slide, and they told me sternly, in a gentle way, we don't call it private cloud, it's called dedicated environment. So they have nothing to say about private cloud, but they have something to say about dedicated environment. Of course, I think you can do the translation in your head, but when you look at that and add it up, which is, again, we're at this number of, 45, 50%, like something there when you look across what dedicated cloud and non-cloud is, or my category, not public cloud, is the way that I put it. Now, there's lots of other surveys and charts that you can look at, that you can dive into. But when I look at this is one of the benefits of having a liberal arts degree, a philosophy degree with a minor in English, is you don't really care about numbers. You more care about the feel and the vibe of it, right? So when I look at these charts, this is what I conclude is, so if you want to know where the workloads are, it's somewhere between 50-50 and 60-40. And I don't really even know the legend of the colors on the pie chart. It doesn't really matter, right? The point is there's a lot of the workloads are split quite nicely between these two. So it's really worth thinking about when you're figuring out running these applications, supporting them. When you're doing something like platform engineering, applying it to both sides of that, thinking of being conscious of how it works in public and in dedicated environments. So first, it's good to have a definition of what a platform is, because it has changed over the years, right? If you know anything about platform engineering, you've seen this. This is the canonical definition everyone cites from March 2018. The people at ThoughtWorks, always a couple of years ahead of identifying trends, things like that. And you read through this, right? And it's very developer oriented. It's helping these developer teams be very self-service oriented, get what they need to run their applications, and not necessarily like bug operations people. Of course, being a former application developer, we always think everyone is bugging us, even if we're bugging them. We're at the top of the heap. That's at least our viewpoint of things, which makes us insufferable and annoying. So it's little wonder that you would want to automate that and not ever talk to an application developer, which is one goal of platform engineering. Now, as far as like the capabilities that you're having them achieve, pardon the enterprise speak there, the stuff you're making it easier for them to do, you can look through here. And becomes interesting about platform engineering and private cloud is you're not only focusing on developer experience, as we said, or productivity. You have, this is like the annoying thing of enterprise stuff, is you have these other stakeholders, which are compliance people and security people, the CFO, which you were introduced to in the previous talk. And they really don't care about DevX, and they wonder why it's capitalized weird and things are together, right? They have different concerns. And oftentimes the platform team is the interface to them as well. You have these multiple stakeholders who are interested in that. And I think it's pretty fair, at least when I observe a lot of what platform engineering teams in private cloud are doing, they act as a bridge for that, whether they want it or not, between these different roles. Now, to give you a visual, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, this is a couple of years old now, but they have a great reference architecture for what a platform is with explanation. It's the kind of fading out here is great, because if you were to see the colors they chose, they're like pastel Easter colors, which I guess are in popularity for like track jackets nowadays, but I don't know. It's not really my aesthetic. But you can see, and this is the one that we have, which of course is the best one in existence, but I felt obligated to put it up here. But you can, if you want to have like a non-vendor agnostic look, you can look at the CNCF one, and you can see when you look through it that sure, there's some runtime things in there, there's monitoring, whatever you want to call observability, but there's also middleware in there, right? And even a little bit of portals. There was one point when internal developer platform, when the P meant portal, back when Backstage was very popular. And it's since the P has since changed from portal to platform, but you have that included there as well. So you look at what this platform is, right? And I would say that it's all the stuff that you need between an infrastructure layer and the actual apps running to do that automation of providing services to your developers, but also to support running it in production and monitoring it, bundling it all up into that platform. So a logical question is to ask if Kubernetes is a platform, which is a logical question many of the people I've talked with over the years have had. They'll stand up the Kubernetes cluster, these operations people, and they're like, I've heard all the great stuff about my developers are going to be happy. They even asked me to stand up this Kubernetes thing, and they're not using it. It's maybe a conflict of priorities and actual desires that people had. And I think that's because really, like, Kubernetes is not a platform, right? It's more of a layer of infrastructure. If you remember going back even to the CNCF definition of a platform, what in that is that they also, I'll give you a bigger one, this is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, the home of Kubernetes, which appears nowhere on this definition of a platform. And so really, a platform doesn't care about the infrastructure so much, or it's not in charge of it. Instead, it's interested in all of the stuff above it, right? So just standing up Kubernetes doesn't really get you anywhere. And indeed, you see that in surveys that come out. This is one that we used to do for 4 or so years. And you can see, to read this chart to you, you can see that year after year, as Kubernetes becomes more used and popular, it doesn't necessarily help out to shorten software developer cycles. And that's because, again, that's not really what it's for. The focus of it is more on infrastructure, orchestrating things, as you probably well know, and not taking care of all that middleware and all the things that developers want. Like, it has a kind of an implied architecture and things that application developers should use, but that's a weird, fuzzy area. And then if you look at what one of the, I don't know, original people doing Kubernetes, Craig here, even said at some point, like, there wasn't really this intention that developers or maybe anyone would like interact with the guts of Kubernetes, like all the annoying stuff that people talk about, right? And you've probably heard the great thing that Kubernetes is not a platform. It's a platform for building platforms, which is exactly the point, right? It's something that you build a platform on top of. And I think in private cloud, a lot of people don't behave like that, right? Like they instead, as I was joking about, they stand up a Kubernetes cluster, they give access to developers, and then they wonder why nothing magnificent happens afterwards, right? Because they haven't really focused on all of that other stuff in between them. So now let's focus on, let's say you do have a platform in place. You've got a wonderful one. Hopefully you've selected one that helps increase my monthly compensation and keep me employed instead of some other one. That would always be fantastic. I'd appreciate it. How do you run these platforms in private cloud? And there's a lot of overlap if you are running a platform or in charge of a platform that you might be getting from another cloud. But I think the degree to which you do some activities is slightly different. So the first one, and again, this is maybe the biggest overlap thing and also the biggest thing that I think most platform people don't get around to doing, is changing your orientation about how you're, to use older terms, delivering your IT services or doing whatever your goal may be here. And you orient yourself around, if you remember back to a platform, you're trying to make it easier for developers to do their stuff, right? To more rapidly get their software out. But you're also thinking about the stakeholders that you have. You want to make sure that you're compliant. Someone earlier mentioned being compliant with DORA, not the DevOps DORA, but the European banking regulations for DORA, right? So that's a concern that you end up having that bubbles up to the platform team that isn't necessarily a developer concern, right? So you're bringing together these stakeholders, but you're always thinking about developers primarily, maybe these other stakeholders, as customers of your platform, right? You don't necessarily say, I was asked to deliver a cluster or a database and achieve these levels of SLAs or SLOs or MBOs or whatever OKRs and whatever metrics that you have that show up on that Christmas tree status slide you look at every week, where things are green, yellow, and red. And I delivered that successfully at budget. I defied the iron triangle, and now everything's great. And however it gets used, or if it's useful, if you don't say this part out loud, of course, not my problem. Right? Like I gave you the thing you want. Now, this doesn't really pan out so well with platforms because you deliver something that seems to meet specs. You take it to the application developers. And again, remember how annoying they are and like full of themselves. If they don't like it, they're not going to use it, right? And they're going to do an even worse thing. They're going to build up their own platform. And imagine in a large enterprise, you have 300, 500, 1,000 applications, and you have all these developers building their own platforms. And now you got a mess, right? That's terrible to have all these accidental platforms around. So the way that I see people who are running platforms in private cloud get around this is they take on this product management mindset. They take on this mindset of developers are customers. Whenever you have a customer, it's important to figure out what it is they need and what they want, and to continuously monitor if we're delivering them a good product. And that's indeed what, this is just a quote from a presentation of one of the former platform owners at Mercedes-Benz, following this exact role of doing product management, right? Talking with developers, shocking activity for traditional operations people to do, finding out what they need, understanding it, but equally importantly, not only delivering it once, but then trying to gather feedback and observe if it's worked or not, and taking that back and changing things, right? Maybe you chose the wrong way to implement some service. Maybe you chose a less gooder, if you will, service, and you could do it differently, right? And you want to have that vendor mentality or cloud vendor mentality, whatever, where you really do care about adoption of it and if it's useful or not. And again, I don't think that's a normal trait that you have in a private cloud setup. And as an example, you could go to your operations group, maybe even in your application developer group, and say, do we have anyone who's a product manager here? And chances are high, the answer is pretty much no, that you don't have product managers who are doing that. You might have a project manager, probably have a couple hundred scrum masters running around doing whatever they do. But there's probably not someone following product management discipline. Now, the next thing that comes up a lot is, just to give you another possible warning for a topic you may not like, is marketing, which is where I worked in a while. So sorry about all the bad marketing. I'll take the feedback back to my peers and we'll do some of the squiggly diagram things to find the conflicting things that we two are dealing with, and we'll raise good children, hopefully. But the marketing that ends up happening, right? And this is implied by a lot of the classical platform talk. You remember one of the weird points in classic traditional platform talk is you can't force people to use your platform, which I don't know about that. Like they need to be attracted to your platform and like it. Now, let's take this developer as your customer mentality again, right? Despite what us technical people may think, I'm immune to marketing. I don't like marketing. It's terrible. But really, it's been my experience working on the selling software to people that if you don't have marketing, no one's going to know about or buy your stuff or understand it. So marketing is actually quite viable. Now, if you don't like the word marketing, you can say community management, developer relations, whatever. But you need some way, if you have a customer base, developers, of, again, pardon my phrasing here, connecting with them, right? Explaining what it is you do, why it's valuable to them, showing empathy that you understand the problems that they have, and that you're actually bringing their very essence into account in the way that you're getting your product out the door and being successful with it, right? Now, in private cloud, this comes up. This is another huge challenge that people have. And thankfully, just like with product management, where you can look up, product management is a very nailed down, proven, like, I'm sure my product manager friends, although I don't think I have any anymore, would tell me that it's actually a very complex, esoteric thing, and there's a lot of stuff. But anyway, experts always think their stuff is esoteric and very nuanced, which is fine. I could probably talk about how to put together slides and podcasts and stuff till the end of the day. But marketing is also a pretty well understood thing, right? It's not some new skill you have to learn. I don't even know what, like some new skill that comes up, how to configure Kubernetes, right? Like it's actually, you can follow the same sort of things. Now, when it comes to a platform, what I've seen over the past decade pretty much that's successful are a couple of key things. One thing, number 0, is to do it. Something we always forget in lots of advice and programs that's given, is you have to actually do the stuff. But to think about, let's say, a quarterly cadence of having an internal conference, very similar to this. The chairs are not as comfortable. You want to actually put on a conference internally where you not only talk about your stuff, so it's not just an all-hands brown bag or whatever people call that kind of thing nowadays, but let's think about it in a marketing way. You're talking about your platform, but you also are bringing developers who use that platform to do testimonials about how good it is, to go over what works and doesn't work for them, to do case studies. And here you're, again, connecting with, empathizing, and winning over developers. You're demonstrating that your platform is worth using by having other people who've used the platform talk with them, references, people in marketing would say. And doing this on a quarterly basis not only does that training, raising that awareness, but has that ongoing marketing with that comes with it. Now, hopefully it's obvious, there's obviously things like community engagement. Most organizations I've talked with who are successful at platform engineering, whether it's Slack or Matter, or I don't know if I've ever talked to an enterprise that uses Discord. That sounds like it would be bizarre. Whatever internal chat room you have, surprisingly, a lot of them move from a ticket-based way of doing support to just a chat-based way of doing it. I think maybe 5 or 8 years ago, we called that chat ops, if I remember. I didn't know if that was for support or you were telling the computer what to do, like chat ops way, but let's call it platform chat ops or something. Just pretend like I didn't say that. That sounds stupid. But so that's one thing, engaging with community, but the big marketing thing, and you can read about, if you don't mind military stuff, you can read about the US Air Force applying this next thing, which is you want to think about branding and identity, right? Like, again, us developers and technical people, we're immune to marketing, right? So this only applies to maybe other people who would be doing this because we're totally immune to it. But you come up with a brand that your customers identify with, and it becomes part of who they are, right? And what you're doing with the platform there is it's very important. I've seen this over and over again, to come up with a t-shirt. Like one of my coworkers, Deshaun, always jokes, first thing he asked is, so you've got this new initiative in here, show me your t-shirt. And what he means by that, of course, is we all love t-shirts. There's a big pile of them. They have great shirts at this conference, not cheapy ones. But you get this shirt and it unites you together with the platform. And it also puts a brand name on there, right? So you can see this is a shirt that the Air Force had, the US Air Force, and very clever, right? Because they were introducing Agile, and this is back when AF meant more than Air Force. And like, great branding right there, right? So this person who is one of the DevRel people who'd go around, give out this t-shirt, talk about the platform that they had, the initiative, and it really raised this community awareness, community engagement with it. And then you also typically come up with a brand for the platform, because one of the worst things, if you don't have a brand, is if you use the traditional, the accepted brand, you're going to get in a lot of arguments that you're not doing it right. Maybe you've encountered this when you talk about DevOps, SRE, platform engineering, Agile, XP, as you say, oh, we're doing Scrum, and then you spend half your time just debating with people that you're doing it wrong, instead of actually just figuring out how to do something right. And so, if you come up with your own name, what the Air Force called it is Kessel Run, which again, depending on your age and what you like, great stuff. You're basically like, oh, I see, I'm Han Solo, so I'm going to be part of this platform now. I'm going to be part of this, pardon the phrase, journey that we're going on. But you see this branding across places like BT, ING down here, all sorts of places. But you really spend a lot of time on that, on brand and engagement, a lot of time on marketing. In fact, I often see that people have one person dedicated to that, if not more. At JP Morgan Chase, they have a team of about 6 or 8 people globally who help out with this kind of community engagement and DevRel things. Now, finally, the thing that I think is done a little differently and very important in private cloud when you're doing it on your own is really baking into your system how to justify your existence, right? Every year, you're going to meet that CFO person, and they're going to be like, so why am I paying you again? Like, why are we funding this organization? Because if you're successful with your platform engineering, no one will notice, which is terrible when you want budget. Like, even if you fix something, you're going to be noticed, even if it was done poorly. So what I see people doing is, these are just some suggested ones, but come up with some metrics that map to the business value, map to showing that you're achieving business goals, whatever it is the organization wants, and start tracking those metrics so you can demonstrate them. Don't do this it's bad if you have to do this all of a sudden for a meeting on Monday and it's like Friday at 4:59 p.m. You got to figure out how to gather these metrics, but figure out what metrics you can have so that you're constantly showing your value at any given moment to the people who want to know why you still exist, what you've done for them. And this is very important in anything that you do in a large organization, but especially for something as both critical and hard to understand by a non-technical person and often expensive as running your own platform. And with that, I think I'll wrap up and have just a few seconds here for questions. I appreciate you attending this here. There's a lot more platform stuff to go if you're interested, and I'm always happy to talk about it. Thank you.